state of the platform and make it the platform, because we can't mutate the current state of the platform, of course. All right. So first, we're going to talk about the state. We ought to talk about the stats, because after all, stats are fun. So the platform today has 47 packages. 21 of them actually come from GHC Central, meaning they come with the compiler and they're part of the compilation distribution. And 26 of them are added by HP itself. This comprises 302,000 lines of code as of the last release. This is not going to be the compiler. These are the packages that are the Haskell platform. We've made 9 releases since the inception of the platform in 2009. And amazingly, we do this on 11 or more distributions at this point with each release. So there's a Mac distribution, there's a Windows distribution, and then there's 9 or more Linuxes, distributi, I don't know. Some more interesting stats. For the last 3 months, June is a good point because we released the last Haskell platform right at the beginning of June. So for a quarter, we had 21,000 downloads. That's approximately 200 a day. And although there is a big spike in the first 3 days, we are still pretty much steady at about 200 and change a day, which is kind of amazing. The breakdown there is, well, it's mostly Windows, some Mac, a little bit of source distributions. But the real problem is we have absolutely no idea how many Linux downloads there are because they don't come from us. In other words, they're not on Haskell.org's infrastructure. They're downloaded from the distributions. So presumably there's another huge chunk that is Linux, and we don't know what it is. Maybe we should put like a mole that calls back home. But for a really good stat is the number of times the platform is mentioned on the Haskell channel, which has been 983 for the quarter, which is approximately 10 times a day. What I find interesting here is that means there are 20 times the number of downloads for mentions on IRC. So if someone thinks Haskell is just a bunch of geeks hanging out in Freenode, it's obviously bigger than that. Lastly, we need to mention all the people who are involved in creating the platform. This is, I'm sure I have left people off. If you think your name belongs up here, it's because you didn't put it in the Haskell Platform wiki, where I could copy it. But there are a lot of people involved in making the platform. It's not just a small number. And thank you to all the people, especially the build maintainers, who have to go through a lot of work to get the whole thing out and into the distributions. So, yay, lots of people. All right, let's talk about the content of the platform. That strange picture, by the way, is looking up at platform number 2 of the shuttle construction tower, where they build or assemble the shuttle, and you can see platforms 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and 8. If you look up, that's looking straight up. Each outline is another platform on the way up, and it's the shape of it's a sliced shape of the shuttle. Love that picture. Okay, so what is the content of the platform? Well, that's the content of the platform. There are all the 44 packages and 3 utilities. I guess they count as packages at the bottom. The first set is the GHC set, and the bottom set is the set that the platform sort of adds on. And so that's a fairly good, good chunk of functionality. I want you all to kind of glance for 5 seconds at the list of features, like what kind of functionality are we providing here? Because I think important for us to think going forward is like, how do we compare to other platforms, say? So, for example, here's Ruby. Now, it's really hard to compare apples to apples because different languages and environments chunk up their modules in different kinds of ways. But Ruby has 112 packages. But take a sort of brief look at the kind of functionality they're offering, right? I can see some really odd things, like I'm not sure why in this day and age we need NetFTP, but obviously we still do, or someone thinks they do. But a lot of the stuff is kind of similar to the stuff we have in the platform, except there's sort of a bit more of it. So that's one thing. We could look at PHP. Here, calling it a module is really a stretch, right? Because everything in PHP is in the global namespace. 185 packages, all in the global namespace. But man, they really do offer a lot. I mean, that's like everything in the world. And you might think, well, it's PHP and it's really hard to extend, so yeah, it all has to be in there. But that's a lot of interesting functionality. But we could look at Python, which doesn't have that problem. Here we have 222 modules. Again, I know it's really hard to read from back there, but there is a lot of stuff in there. I noticed there's a lot of database stuff, like DBM support. There's a huge pile of XML standard stuff in there. There's like weird stuff like, and I think UUCP encoding is in here somewhere. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there. And in fact, now these are all dynamic systems, and you might think, well, as platforms, they have to ship with all their modules. That's common because, you know, people don't actually ship compiled binaries. We don't have that problem, Mark, so we don't need that many packages. So let's look at Java. Java ships with over 240, and oh my god. Yeah, there really is a package prefix called org.omg. So the point here is that other platforms have substantial functionality in them, a lot of it, and I think we really need to begin to take that to heart at this point. So what are we missing? What's missing? This is my, I spent half an hour staring at those other lists and kind of eyeballed what I thought was maybe important, but any of you will come up with a slightly different list, and that's fine. I know many of you are probably wincing at half the stuff here, like who wants to tread in the database morass, right? Because we don't want to start a war in the Haskell game. We need this database adapter. But all these other packages, all these platforms, out of the box, they support some number, if not multiple, database systems. There's a lot of things on here. There really are. And there's some, as I said, other big pitfalls, like most of those other systems offer some UI subsystem, some more, some less. Java's got a huge, all of Swing is included. Python has all of TK, bound. We have, I'm not even sure what we would have, so it's not clear. But there's a huge, this is just the beginnings of a list of stuff that I think, as a straw man, we should have this stuff in the platform. We should have this much stuff. All right, I want to talk about the process of building Haskell Platform. Okay, that might be overstating it a little bit. It's not really that much of a train wreck. Okay, this is the current process as I envisioned after doing the last release. This is what I'm trying to run the current release on. This is what we have. We have a kickoff party. Woohoo! Are you going to throw me a party? We talk about proposals and we have discussion. I'm not sure where the dividing line between those two things are. I said it at, I don't know. So it's 6 weeks of talking about what should go in the platform. And then the process should be that we decide, we're done, cut. These are the versions of the packages that will be in the next platform. We make that decision, and then we have 5 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and a week to build essentially alphas and betas. I don't really like that term. Because we may not need to do betas, and then a final build. You might ask why those builds each take 2 weeks. After all, isn't it just like, hit and build? And the reason it takes 2 weeks is because we have 11 platforms, right? And even now we don't get all those maintainers to do a first build early on, all as much as I would like them to. And even then, we're all human and volunteers, and to give you an idea, when I build the Mac version of the platform, yes, I got it down to a make script with only one hand intervention action at the very end. But that script still takes a good chunk of time to build, and then I distribute it, and then I have to bring it up on 4 different versions of the Mac OS to make sure I haven't killed something in some version, in some variant. And then I have to do it all again because I have to do 32-bit and 64-bit. So a release of Haskell Platform, even for one OS, is a fair good chunk of work, and we have to do it, hopefully we would do it 11 times. And so coordinating all that, that's why it takes 2 weeks. Anyway, so that's the schedule. I want you to get a good chunk of that, right? That is 11 weeks end to end, right? That's how long it takes from the time we start. So that's that. Now we have some problems in building the platform today. So first off, the build is really an astonishing mix. I don't know if anyone's actually tried to build any version of the platform, but it involves a lot of stuff. There's things like shell scripts which compile Haskell, which then run the Haskell, and then they run make scripts, and then I think there's a recursion. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's kind of crazy. That can be a bit of a problem. How the different builds relate is literally unknown, which means the platform comes out there are many different parts to it, and which builds are using, we have a .cabal file that defines the platform, but we have scripts that build a source release, and which builds are using the cabal file, and which one's using the source release, and there's this intermediate thing that's in there too, and so that's a bit of a problem because it's not unified and clear. We don't have clear reproducible instructions for every single distribution, which we really ought to have. And lastly, how GHC fits in is, well, as I said, it's interesting, which is to say, recognize that there are, there's parts of GHC that dictate how things happen in the platform. In other words, a version of GHC comes out and we discover there's a new package that's like GHC requires. So now the platform is just increased by a package, which is fine, but we have to sort of account for that. And then it's also, GHC is shipped in many different forms, and not every version of Haskell Platform uses the same form of GHC to build the platform distribution. So it's sort of an interesting, it's all working, but it's a little bit squirrely right now. We do have some process problems. One is something, my big push this time and next time is to get the maintainers of the included packages much more involved in the process. In the past, we've done things like, well, this package is included, so we'll bump it to the latest version on package. So this time I'm not doing that. So if you are a maintainer of a package in the platform, yay, thank you very much. But I'm going to ask you each release to please certify the stable version you want in the platform is this one. We've done, last time I did some guessing and I guessed wrong and it was painful. So we're going to do that. We have a lot of lists. We have a lot of mailing lists in this community. And that's a little bit of a problem because I post things and someone says something on this list and someone else says something on that list. And so we're going to try to get that down to just, if you're involved in the platform, the Haskell Platform mailing list. I know the libraries list has traditionally been heavily involved. We'll still do announcements there, but I'd like to get discussion all on the platform, in the platform list. Proposals, I'm sure everyone here knows, and at least the Legend of the Pain, that is a problem, and we're going to have to fix that. Our proposal process is, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's broken, it's just sort of slow and sluggish. It's like a snail, and we got to get it a little bit up to, we got to rev it and ramp it a little bit, and I'm hoping for everyone to bear with. Changes hard, I know, but we'll try that. And lastly, we have a track, but it doesn't get used very much, and it's got a whole bunch of old cruft in it, and I'm not quite sure what to do about that. So we need to do some maintenance on tracking our bugs and keeping track of stuff. The track gets used for the wrong things. People think they can make a proposal by just putting something in track, which is not true. And then other people put things in track and they just sit there for 3 years. There are things in the track which haven't been touched for a long time. So it needs some cleaning up, or maybe we'll do a different thing, I'm not sure. But that's our process problems. And lastly, there's this been constant tension and issue about when to release. The platform as originally conceived was to come out 2 major revisions a year, 6 months apart, with minor revisions at 3-month intervals and or bug fixes in intervals. Typically that hasn't quite happened. We're going to hope to get the 6-month intervals regularized now. There's a real desire for predictable release times. And that comes mostly from distributions and the upstream OSs that consume the platform. It's really important for those people to know and be able to schedule how this work flows into that work. So it's a big desire. I also hear that people really like to know when someone says the platform's coming, that it actually is. So predictable release times is a big thing. But we have a tension because we always want the latest and the greatest. Right? And the latest and greatest always means someone at the last minute saying, wait, I'm going to patch that, or can't you just wait like 2 weeks for the next thing? So there's this constant tension there for us. All right, so how do we resolve those problems? I think it's by looking for our goals. Hopefully our platform won't be quite as hard to find as that one. I want to go back to the source. So here is from the original Haskell Batteries Included paper by Duncan, Isaac, and Don, are the original aims. A set of default libraries that implement common functionality conveniently packaged for each operating system, as well as a set of dependencies which can be widely deployed and work on all major operating systems, and a set of packages to include when providing Haskell support for an operating system. So that's, there's some nicely lofty goals there, but I want to kind of unpack and rethink that, and I'm going to do that by going back and thinking about who is the platform for. So this is who I think the platform is for. First off, as we all know, it's for programmers new to Haskell. I mean, the major, on #Haskell, approximately 10 times a day, someone shows up and says, how do I get Haskell? And 17 people jump on and say, install the platform, which is great. So the platform should be for new users because it should be the easiest way to get Haskell up and running. I think we should also look to Haskell Platform being for programmers who are using Haskell but aren't focused on Haskell. Right? In the same way that when I use Python to solve a problem as a programmer, like I don't think about like Pythons and library management and versions. I just like use the Python that's there. That's what I want. That's what I want to have happen. And so we should be thinking about that set of programmers. I mean, I realize that some of the people in this room, right? Those programmers are not the ones going to come to ICFP. Those are the programmers who we hope we have, or we hope to have, who will be using Haskell to solve problems, where Haskell's just the tool. I think the platform should be for package creators, although traditionally package creators have mostly, I think, not considered it that way, but this is the way in which I want you guys to think about this. Everyone in this room is completely capable of installing GHC from source, getting Cabal installed up and running, and then loading precisely the set of latest versions of packages you need off the package. Like, no one in this room has a problem with that. Most people. Okay, maybe you all have problems with that, but you can all do it. Or at least we'll all suffer through doing it. I know. At the moment, people put up packages on package, and they say, and good package maintainers, as many of you are, will test and make sure that the package works in the last 3 versions of GHC, or the last 2 versions of GHC. And you will say, yes, my latest version of this package will work in GHC 7.6, 7.4.1, and 7.04. The problem is that when you say that, you are constraining things like which version of byte string do you work against. But you're saying absolutely nothing about things like versions of network or versions of parsec. And so the problem is your package may work on GHC 7.04, but with versions of network and parsec that don't match what someone else's package that works on 7.04 works with. Right? So we should leverage, as package maintainers, for backwards compatibility testing and for the fact that the Haskell platform encompasses a wider collection of packages. And so my hope is that we will use it as a form of testing. So we can say, yes, this package works on the last 3 versions of Haskell platform, because that will get more consistency about what versions of packages. Okay, so given that, I sort of went ahead and sort of simplified out those earlier statements from that library, and I think we can kind of state that the platform should aim to be 2 things that are in sort of 2 main categories. One is a set of libraries with good common coverage. This is my call for, we want to expand it out like we saw those other platforms. And it should work cross-platform as much as possible, right? Which is a reasonable goal, right? We don't have to exclude things that are platform specific. Otherwise we couldn't have POSIX, right? And we should be clearly or explicitly a versioned release. And our goal is stability, reference points for testings. And the last point is here, this is the stretch goal for the platform. Someday, 1, 2, 5, 10 years from now, some major operating system vendor like Apple or Microsoft might actually say, I think it's time we included Haskell in our distribution. I mean, Apple already includes, 3 versions of Python in every version of Mac OS X? The day that happens, they're only going to do that if including Haskell has an obvious meaning. Right? Because they aren't going to be the ones to pick and choose. When they include Python, they take the Python distribution with all those libraries and install it. And they do the same for Java, and they do the same for Ruby. And so we want to make sure that they can do the same for Haskell, which means that Haskell has to be kind of ready to be a full-fledged distribution that's already there. Now, I know that's a big stretch, but I think it's something we should aspire to. From that, as part of the team, if you're working on either packages or distribution or the release team or in any other way, I think therefore aims like the original aims or the restated version of the aims lead us to these guiding principles. This is the stuff that I'm hoping we agree is how we're going to operate. Because sometimes we've had some unclarity about whether we should or should not do something. So one, we want no surprises. Right? The platform should not be a surprise, ever. And the thing really should just work, and I can't emphasize that part enough, right? It's really got to always just unpack and go. That's my aim, certainly in the Mac distribution itself, but in all the distributions. We should really make reasonable choices about packages to include. If we're going to get to that kind of broad coverage, we have to not be, quite so, we have to make reasonable choices, not perfect choices. We should be having packages with active support. One thing I want to make sure that I don't think I currently have today is an active maintainer for every package in the platform that I can, as I need, shoot off an email to and get a response within, 24 hours. That would be really nice. And we really need to not let perfect be the enemy of good, or maybe we should say great, because one thing we should recognize is what we're shipping is great. The packages are great. And I see sometimes discussion and argument about whether or not something should go into the platform based on whether or not it's perfect. We're not going to get perfect. Right? And we don't need to get perfect. I mean, you look at what gets shipped in Python, and I'm sure there are packages in that Python distribution for which Guido is like, oh, I can't believe you put that in there. Right? You know, and now they're stuck supporting it. And that'd be true. We will end up making such decisions, and we will end up getting stuck supporting something that we're a little unhappy with. But that's okay. It's more important for us to make a really good system and a system that has good coverage than it is to make a system that is perfect. And lastly, I think our last guiding principle really should constantly be to think about making programmers' lives easier. And by that, of course, I mean primarily also those programmers who are going to be using Haskell, not working on Haskell. And we should really constantly think about the platform's job is to make those programmers' lives easier, which means we end up including a bunch of packages that we can't say that every Haskell programmer can use, but a lot of Haskell programmers will use. We're making those people's jobs easier. So that should be a principle. Okay, so going forward, I have some plans for the platform, or I hope we will have some plans for our platform. It's kind of washed out. It's the bridge on the East River Bridge. Plans. So one, as I said, we need a better proposal process. I don't know, we can go look at other community proposal processes, and I'm sure we did the first time, but we can go look at them again, and with our experience, figure out how to make it somewhat better. So we need that. I really need active involvement of all package maintainers that have a package in the platform. That's, well, last time around, that was a notable problem for me. Lastly, we also, it's not crucial because we're getting it out there, but we really should be improving our build process. I've had one or two people email me, it's like, so I can't actually reproduce the Haskell platform build. And to me, well, that's a big problem. Right? It's got to be a reproducible standard build. I'm going to give you some things in my worry closet. It's probably going to incite riots here. Here's my short-term worry closet. We do not have consensus on OpenGL. We have an I don't want to get into the details of the OpenGL problem. You can see me after during the break. We can talk about it in great detail. But OpenGL is a looming problem, and we have to kind of, and any decision we make is going to be painful, and we're just going to have to suck it up and figure out what to do and do the right thing. Second, my worry closet is package security. I mean, aside from the fact that it's, it's not necessarily stability, it's security. We are including packages in the platform. Those packages form the core code which we expect to ship and include everywhere. I don't expect application writers to take responsibility for the security properties of packages they're including. Today, as you probably know, maybe someone's going to kill me for saying this, if you have a package account, you can upload other people's packages. You can make a release on any package, and that's not a good thing, right? It's really not. So we need to get some package security in there, at least for me, as putting out a secure version of the platform, a platform that's stable and you can sort of get behind, needs that. Save Haskell is a worry. I love it, don't get me wrong. I think some people have taken my prior comments wrong. I think Save Haskell is a good thing, but Save Haskell is going to be a big deal for the platform. And the reason there is because the majority of people, what the platform declares is safe and trustworthy chips is going to be considered trustworthy. And so that's going to be a very big responsibility for the platform team as a whole to decide, okay, we're really kind of making a statement, because I think practically that's what's going to happen. And lastly, my worry closet is GHC stability. I love you guys, you do incredible work. You just came out with 7.6. I heard 7.8 maybe before the end of the year, and as the guy trying to produce the stable version of, I'm like, oh my God, it hasn't even been 4 months. So it's in my worry closet. The thing I worry about is trying to make sure I pick the stable version, or that we get the stable version of GHC in there. And again, that's part of that huge tension, is that everyone always wants, everyone in this crowd, not maybe our other users, always wants the absolute latest version of GHC. But that may not equal making sure we put out a stable platform. So I perhaps need some help and input from the GHC team on this one, because it's in my worry closet. And with that, I'm done. Let's build it. Let's build the platform and make it even bigger and greater and cooler. Thanks.
Can I first of all say that Don and I are very, very pleased that that you agreed to take charge of doing the releases, because Don has disappeared off the face of the earth, and I've been enormously busy, so we are very thankful that you have picked this up.
Well, you're welcome.
And also, I agree with basically everything you said as well. That's the other thing.
Yay!
I think you're missing one important task of the platform, and that's consolidation. So we might have cases like serialization libraries that are several choices for a long time on Hackage, both are being used.
Yes.
It's not clear what's going to be the canonical, but there should be a canonical version for the benefit of the non-Haskell worker programmers. And I think that's another task of the platform to find a consensus, or figure out what the consensus is, and then enforce the consensus by including stuff in the platform. Not a question, but that's it.
So I agree with you, and I just want everyone to recognize the tension and difficulty of making those choices, right? So if there's multiple versions, multiple different ways of doing the same thing, and those packages are there, and they all have their adherence, I'm going to go back to the let's not make perfect be the enemy of great, right? Which is the sense that we could probably all debate on the libraries platform how to, either merge these two libraries or argue the merits of them forever. We might have to do something like many of those other platforms, like maybe we just include them both sometimes. Sometimes we'll just pick one and say, that's the one, and it may not have been the perfect choice, but it's better to have something than nothing and argue forever. So yeah, so I agree with you. Everyone, you gotta, help me and not get too agitated when we have to make those hard choices.
Licensing. I guess
Good.
that's an ugly word sometimes, but you didn't mention it.
No, that's so I'm glad to hear it's a concern for somebody, which means A, please pipe up on the list if you're not part of that. Yeah, we should, and by licensing I presume you mean making it absolutely clear what the licenses are in the set of libraries that are there.
Yes, and what what licenses libraries must have in order
To be part of it, right.
Yeah, to be considered for inclusion.
Yeah, so I think that takes, I agree with you, I didn't put that on there, not for any particularly good reason other than omission. So yeah, we should probably do a very thorough review of what's on there currently and form a plan. There is, I guess I'll say, there is a Haskell Platform committee, that list was up earlier. I understand that not all the members on it are currently active. It might be time to review the committee membership so that we can get some active stuff there. But yes.
Two quick questions. One is, are you going to use Shape for your new build system? That's a serious question. And the other is, you mentioned just at the end about stability and
Yes.
the tension between releasing earlier.
Yeah.
So would there be mileage in having a kind of bleeding Haskell platform for the people in this room that uses a fairly recent JNC and fairly recent libraries? And essentially that was the beta test for the one that was then going to lag quite a long way, but be solid like a rock.
So to answer the second one first, if the first one had been answered, then the second one would be more palatable. Once we have a more clear build system where we can get a consistent automatic build pipeline going, yeah, then we could do a bleeding edge, or we could do a version of the platform 6 months in advance of the expected release one. That might be a good thing. I will hope we will have more volunteers when we start doing that. Yeah. As far as the build system, by the way, to answer the second one, I haven't yet thought about what we can do that will meet all the constraints. I haven't quite figured out what all the constraints are because I don't know what all the distributions are using to build their versions of the platform. So, Shape might be lovely. I certainly remember the talk and liked it.
I'd like to raise the topic of quality assurance. In the tools that I've released in the past, they had non-volunteer teams, which meant we could get somebody to do almost any job. If they were nice enough to make it their job for them, and pay them a full-time wage for doing it. And that enabled us, for example, with Visual C++, to have a quality assurance team of more than 20 full-time people. And
That would be nice.
as you can imagine, what it takes for the build to pass is pretty impressive when you have that level. So obviously we're not going to be in that same situation, and that's understandable. But I think it would be very, very interesting for us to say, as we continue to make the build more automatic, to begin to set a very clear goal for what level of component testing and regression testing each component should have, as well as interoperability testing between the included components and making sure that those tests succeed equally well on all the supported platforms, which is something I've already started to hear from commercial users that they'd like to see more of.
Yeah, I could not agree more. There are two sort of long-term, well, maybe they're not so long-term anymore. Most of the packages in the platform do not have unit test suites. So that's a little bit of a worry. And we do not have an integration test suite. If anyone would like to build a program that uses precisely, and at least in a non-trivial way, every package in the platform, that would be an awesome program to have. We would run it and test it with every release. Yes, so I agree with that, and that is going to take some effort and some engineering effort, not just sort of release manager wrangling effort. So I hope the community is up for that.
All right, and with that, we'll have to move on.
Great. Thanks, everyone.